Alright, I guess we'll see how this goes. Hello, everybody. This is Natasha, your signing speaker. Thank you. Welcome to the new subs who just recently subbed. We just hit 400. So, yay! I've been planning to make this video for a while, but stuff always got in the way. So now I'm finally getting around to making it. I think the easiest thing will be to kind of take it point by point. So that's what I'm going to do. Alright. I want to talk today about my journey with sign language. But when you tell your friends, oh, I studied ASL, they kind of assume that you have an interest in the deaf community, which I guess I did at one time. I went to school for like 5 years to learn about the deaf culture, deaf community, and ASL. But I learned a lot more than I expected to about the deaf community, and it's not talked about too much. Frankly, a lot of the stuff I'm going to say in this video would be enough to get me canceled by the deaf community. Or maybe I'll just talk to you, hearing people, because I feel like this message is more directed at you guys anyway, if you're looking to get into ASL, and that may not make sense, but it will once I start explaining, trust me. The reason that I wanted to study sign language wasn't originally because I had a huge interest in the deaf community, which sounds wrong, I suppose. But I wanted to study it when I was 13, so I didn't really know anything about the deaf community. I found out about finger spelling from watching The Miracle Worker, which is a really great movie, by the way, about Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan. And since I like teaching and I like kids and being a Christian, I was raised on the idea of helping the less fortunate. What immediately appealed to me was that it was special, it was a unique way to communicate with people, and it was a way to help people who a lot of people didn't really interact with or care about. Now, if you're hearing and new to ASL, that probably sounded like fine to you, right? What's wrong with that? I started studying fingerspelling after that, memorized the whole alphabet in one day, pretty much. Some people struggled with that for weeks in my classes. I was surprised. Memorizing's always been pretty easy for me, though. I tried to learn ASL from videos, but they were outdated, unfortunately, and from books. Found out later that's really not a good way to learn it. And, I even tried teaching it to some friends, or to my sister, hoping I'd learn more. I got pretty good at memorizing the basic signs, but I didn't know anything about ASL structure, obviously, and my mom had taken ASL when she was my age in college, but it changed so much since then, and she didn't really remember a whole lot. Though, funny story, when I did go to college to take it, I took one of the same professors she had. He was still teaching. And he was one of my favorite professors. Small world, right? So what I found out once I started taking ASL classes, though it was pretty far in that I found this out, is that a lot of people in the deaf community don't like it if you say your reason for learning sign is because you want to help deaf people. And you'd be wondering, what's wrong with wanting to help deaf people? That's what I wondered. What I was told at the events that I had to go to get credit was that deaf people don't like being referred to as disabled, and this is basically direct quote, they do not need hearing people. That's people who can hear conventionally, by the way. They don't need hearing people to communicate. Now, if you're thinking that it's a little odd to tell a group of interpreting students that deaf people don't need them to communicate, I thought so too. But I heard this message pretty much at every event I went to that was hosted by my school or a similar organization. On record, not every deaf person thinks this, and they won't all say it to you, even if they do. But especially where college is concerned, like the more educated deaf people, this tends to be a much more common attitude. In my opinion, because the propaganda that colleges like teach to the deaf community is part of what causes this attitude. So, if you meet an older deaf person, a lot of them won't think this way. But chances are, if they're 30 or younger, that's who you're gonna get, like, saying this. Maybe a little older now, because it's been a while. If you ever seen the show Switched at Birth, or if you haven't, I recommend watching at least the first or second season, because they really dive deep into the attitude that young deaf people and older deaf people who are in the more educational sphere tend to have towards hearing people. So, my reasoning being that I wanted to help, I was set to learn the language with enthusiasm. I finally, when I got to go to school for it, was excited to finally start learning for real. The first class, I kind of already knew everything because I studied independently. After that, it got harder and harder and harder. And the frustrating thing was that after ASL 4 or 5, they didn't really teach us anything anymore. I had one professor who canceled like 8 classes, at least, during the semester. So, missed a lot of learning in that class. Another professor who didn't really teach us, he just talked or signed for the whole class about unrelated subjects, and then all the assignments were posted online. He gave everybody A's anyway. A lot of people got great A's who didn't deserve them, myself included, I think, actually, because I was not doing too well at understanding at that point. Finally, I made it to the interpreting course after several years, and then I had some deaf teachers, some hearing teachers. I preferred the hearing ones because they would at least talk to us. Turns out trying to learn a language while only speaking that language when it's something as difficult as sign language, which is considered a level 4 language difficulty-wise, which means it's up there with Japanese and other more complicated Asian dialects, Eastern dialects. I don't know if I should say Asian. Usually it's them. There are other languages at that level. English is actually, I believe, considered a 4th level language to learn. Can't say I blame other countries for thinking it. It's very confusing. But ASL is up there because it's hard for people who are used to receiving information in their ears to learn to do it with just their eyes and hands. And fun fact, you actually process information slower through your eyes than through your ears. So there's delayed response processing time for hearing people with ASL, and no matter how good we get, generally that never completely goes away, as the professional interpreters will tell you, because our brains are just wired differently. And then for deaf people, because that's the only way they ever know to communicate, they probably don't notice the lag the same way that we do. But for us, it can feel very overwhelming trying to follow the information. So a lot of people really struggle once they get to the higher level of ASL, where it's not just learning vocab, which is easy for everybody to learn, but it's learning sentence structure. It's made harder by the fact that almost no two groups of deaf people use exactly the same signs or the same grammar, and a lot of deaf people prefer to use what we call English grammar, which is how spoken English grammar works, because they're talking mostly to hearing people and their family. The people who tend to use ASL grammar purely are generally the ones who are the most in the deaf community, talking to other deaf people who know ASL, and not every deaf person even uses ASL or their country's version of ASL. A lot of them use what we call PSE, Pidgin Sign Language, which is ASL with more heavy English influence, or they use English signs, which actually have their own set of extra signs like and, at some other stuff I don't remember. I wish they taught us more of it because some people prefer to communicate that way, but there was never really a class offered on that at my college, and it's hard to find anything online for it either. So, hey, if you know a resource for it, hit me up below. I'd like to know, actually. Anyway, by the time I had gotten far enough to learn all this, I was questioning if I was really cut out to be an ASL interpreter. Not because I couldn't learn the language. I mean, I had some learning curves, but after enough time would pass, it would kind of start to sink in. It's more that they don't really teach it to you in a way you can understand, like I said. The teachers who did know how to teach and had experience teaching, because, like, you gotta understand, a lot of deaf professors don't have any teaching experience outside of teaching ASL. And just because you speak a language doesn't mean you know how to teach. I think most students could agree with that who've taken language class or any other class with a teacher who clearly did not like teaching. Knowledge of something is not knowledge of how to teach it. Teaching's a skill. Something I wish that the program at my school really enforced. So some of them could teach and had organized lesson plans and actual resources for us. Some of them, like I said, just talked the whole time and we learned absolutely nothing. And notably, it was after I had kind of gotten in trouble with one of my professors over, I think it was kind of a miscommunication, but probably better to tell that story later. The point is, though, she'd taken me aside already and talked to me about something. And then, out of the blue, the head of the ASL department contacted me with no warning, telling me to come in for a meeting, and I thought I was getting kicked out of the course or something. And apparently it was a screening that everybody was supposed to do. Oops. But I hadn't done. Now, I assume this was true, because I think I heard about it from other people. But why it wasn't like it determined whether you get kicked out. They didn't kick you out. I was told it determined, like, kind of how they'd view your potential. I guess I did not answer the questions the right way. I didn't know that there was a right and wrong reason to learn ASL at the time, or to want to interact with the deaf community, but the wrong reason apparently is that I wanted, like I said, to help deaf people. If you're wondering what they want you to say instead, I honestly have never figured it out. I don't know, maybe promote equal opportunity? I've never really gotten what they expect you to say instead, because to be honest, most of the answers I ever heard, they were picked apart anyway, even if they weren't the same as mine. Anyway, so this, and she was hearing, by the way, so it was a spoken conversation, so no chance of miscommunication, like what happened with some other times where I did not get my point across. So after that, nothing seemed to happen. But my next class was her class, the same ladies. Well, actually, it was joint with a different professor. I'm not going to give their names, because, to be honest, they'd probably, like, be pretty upset if I shared these details. So I'm not going to give their names. If any of my old classmates watch this, they're going to know who I'm talking about, but I highly doubt that's going to happen. So anyway, I got treated differently in the head of the sign language department's class with this professor who had already had the issue with me, and I know she talked to her about it because they talked all the time. And at that point, they were really asking us our motives and stuff, and I probably kept saying the wrong thing because I didn't know it was the wrong thing. I think it was the last class I ever took that I finally found out they didn't want to hear that. Oops. If you think it's a little odd to judge students who are just kind of getting into the deaf world on having this misconception, yeah, I think it's odd too. And why, instead of explaining that to me, they just clearly put me on some kind of list of students who shouldn't be interpreters. And I know that list has to exist, at least in mental form, because I would hear stories of other people who got treated similarly, and then other people who definitely seemed like they were getting special treatment. So, because when us students would talk when the professors were gone or we were on our break or doing assignments together, I mean, the gossip would go around, right? And it was ugly. They also assigned us mentors for the last 2 classes, and the one I had for the first of those final classes, she was hearing. I suppose that probably doesn't matter that much, but it means, again, there was not much chance of me misunderstanding what she was saying. Very unsupportive of my journey. She actually, she asked me multiple times, "Are you sure you want to be an interpreter?" And not because I was expressing doubt about it. That I would have perhaps understood her questioning it, but just because I was having issues with my hands, and I was having issues learning the language. That's why she would question it. She'd be like, "At your level, like, having so much trouble? Like, you shouldn't be having this much trouble." Like, well, I kind of thought the problem, again, was that nobody really helped us identify our weaknesses that well and improve upon them, but I guess that was not the answer they were looking for. I mean, I'd ask for help and feedback, and the only thing is the lady was the head of the ASL department. When I asked for feedback, Pointers was hoping she'd give me something to work on. She just said, "You're the worst signer in the entire class." I'm not kidding, that's what she said. And yeah, no help whatsoever. I'm pretty sure she thought I would quit the course after that, but she didn't understand that I'm the kind of obstinate person who, if you tell me that and it's obvious you want me to quit, that I'm going to probably not quit. Because I don't like being told what to do by people who think that I don't have what it takes, apparently. So, I did not quit, much to their disappointment, I was pretty sure. At least I didn't get kicked out and failed. I'm pretty sure that not failing me had more to do with they don't want to look bad, though. Because if a lot of students, honestly, who graduate, they're not ready to interpret yet, and the professors will even admit they're not ready. The textbooks and the resources will say the same thing, but they don't fail you because it doesn't look good. Because, to be honest, probably 50% or more would fail if it was based on language comprehension. Not kidding. Even the students who are better at it than me were constantly struggling, and they would admit it to the other students. So yeah. So at this point, my motives for being an interpreter, as well as my skills, were both being questioned by me and by the professors. So, yeah. I think you're kind of getting a picture of where this video is going. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break right now.